Thank you, Dave. All right, well, today we continue this long journey through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It's a full year journey we've been going through this. How many of you still have the book? How many of you are still reading the book? One hand, fantastic. All right, well done. Well, we still have copies for sale if you want to get a jump on it and catch up. I hope you've enjoyed the readings throughout. Interestingly, Richard Rohr and Center for Action and Contemplation, they've also been going through the same thing, and they've been wrapping and playing with the blessed statements just this week. So really fascinating, and I hope it's been insightful. Just to give you a clue about what's coming up in January, got two things that we know for sure we're going to do. The first, this has been messing with me for a bit, that as a church that deals with a lot of deconstruction stuff and help people reconstruct their faith and thinking about their faith, one of the things that is challenging is worship itself. And how do we relate to God from this new framework? And so we're going to spend about 6 weeks looking into that. I think the title of the book that we'll be riffing off of, is called The Quest for Thin Places, which is a reference to those moments when you feel like you're just a little bit closer to God, you know what I mean? How do we foster that in our life? So we're going to go deep on that, and then you'll hear about another series that we'll do starting in February in a few minutes. Last week we talked about being judgy. Jesus basically said, don't do it. Don't judge others, or you'll be judged by the same measure, kind of a thing. And apparently, it's an issue, which it did not surprise me, that we all struggle with and deal with, because I got a lot of feedback on it. And a lot of people wanted the quotes and the notes and that kind of a thing. So I wanted to say, because somebody asked me for them after the 9 o'clock, that if you ever see a quote you really like on something, you won't see a quote you really like today, because there aren't many quotes. But if you ever see one, go to our website, go to the teachings column, and the blog that I do is sort of a summary of whatever I teach on. And almost always I have whatever quote I put on the screen is in text there. So you can always go and refer back to it. And I usually have the citation there too if you want to go a little bit deeper. All right, so this is a weird spot because we have Jesus just saying, don't judge everybody. And then this verse comes up. Not that. This verse comes up. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you. It almost sounds like right after he says, don't judge anybody, he uses really judgy language, right? I mean, who's the dog in this situation? Who's the swine that he's talking about? And it gives us just a moment to nerd out for a moment on biblical criticism stuff. So I think you already know this, but the Bible, the whole thing, was written by human beings. Certainly they were passionate about what they were writing, and they invited God into the process, but at least here we don't believe that God guided the pen, right? So you have lots of human influences, lots of human ideas. They're faithful people, they're prayerful people, so lots of God stuff's going to get in there, but it's a mixed bag the whole way through. And so we also know that when it comes to Jesus, he never wrote anything down that we know of or that we have, that everything is remembered what he said, including this entire Sermon on the Mount, which is quite remarkable. We also know that even though in your Bible the words may be in red, Jesus never actually spoke in red. So there's some confusion there. When did he start and stop? We also know that Jesus didn't stop in his tracks and say, okay, everybody, I'm about to give you verse 6. Here comes verse 6. Write it down. He didn't talk about verses. Verses, all those notations, that didn't come till much, 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 much later. Neither did Jesus when he was talking and giving his stump speech like he did on the Sermon on the Mount. Neither did he say, all right, I'm starting a new paragraph right now. But that's actually where I want to get to, because in different translations, this verse shows up differently in your Bible. I often use a New Living Translation. Lately we've been using the Contemporary English version of the Bible. Both really reputable, both good scholarship, but they include this verse in the same paragraph as the don't judge statement. Whereas the NRSV, New Revised Standard Version, which is also a highly regarded translation, and a handful of others, they recognize that this is a shift for Jesus. He's no longer talking about judginess and stuff, he's moving into a whole new theme called holiness. And what does it look like to be people of faith, faithful people, beloved, faithful people? This fits much better in that than in the paragraph on judginess, where this sounds really judgy. So let's just talk about what we're doing. We're going to give you a little contextualization here so we appreciate things that we may not fully get from our vantage point in 2025. He's talking about dogs and pigs, basically. And I'm talking about pigs and pearls today. First of all, when he's talking about dogs, he's not talking about dogs like we talk about dogs for the most of us. When we talk about dogs, we think of the billions of dollars that we collectively spend on our beloved best friends, right? We would almost rather die for our dogs than we might for our children, right? I mean, dogs are so faithful. They're just love walking around, right? I know that Candace right over here, Candace Ramsey, if there's any cause that she's serious about, it'll have to do with dogs. Am I right, Candace? Absolutely, because dogs are the best people around, as a rule. That's how we think about dogs. They're domesticated, they're part of our families. We can't imagine life without them. Sometimes, I know I experienced this, that when we lose a beloved dog, it like breaks us, shockingly breaks us. And we can't believe we're mourning so much for this little furball. Have you ever been there? Right. We almost are embarrassed to say it, but all that says is how much love we have for these little creatures that we call family. That's not how Jesus was thinking back then. In antiquity, whenever you saw dogs, they were not thinking about your best friend who's going to cuddle with you at every TV show or play fetch or tug or whatever. They looked at them as kind of dirty, vile creatures. It's never referred to with kindness in the Older Testament, what we call the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we see pictures of the same thing. So in Jesus' story telling, he shares a parable one time about a rich man and Lazarus. It's a made-up story, and he paints it like this. You got this real rich dude living in a gated community, and right outside the gate is this poor guy named Lazarus who has absolutely nothing. Not only is he terribly poor, he's on death's door, he's got sores all over his body. Jesus is trying to paint a picture of a person who is at the lowest point of human existence. And what detail does Jesus throw in there? Dogs are licking his wounds. So that everybody who hears this is like, oh, this is so awful. Dogs, vile dogs. That's what we're thinking about here. So not a kind thing. And then if you know much about the Jewish religion, you know that pork and pigs are unclean in the Jewish tradition. So in no way are we to think that Jesus is trying to be cute here with talking about dogs and swine. He is saying those are not worthy of the pearls that you are choosing to cast. He's saying pay attention to what you're wasting your pearls on, right? And so just on a very practical level, my hunch is if I just asked, have you ever wasted something on something that you wish you hadn't? We could probably go around the room and have a true confessional moment about that. I waste calories on cookies way too easily. Show me a plate of cookies and I'll show you an empty plate in 5 minutes, kind of a thing. My wife, we have different passions. She is a sports nut. Even though the Dodgers were in the World Series, which was very difficult for her as a Giants fan, she watched every game to the bitter end and agreed it was a really exciting series. But when that last out came, she mourned, not the fact that the Dodgers won it, but she mourned. She mourned that baseball season was over because she loves it so much. And she's got to wait months now for spring training. You can get her in any kind of baseball game. But not just that. She loves basketball. She loves football. She loves watching our niece play volleyball halfway across the country. I mean, she's a sports junkie. Me, on the other hand, while I like sports too, I'm a movie junkie. And she cannot believe that I'll be scrolling through stuff and I'll find a movie that's playing that I've seen 50 times. Time for 51, right? No problem. I could even get into the middle of that movie and get totally sucked in. She can't have a conversation with me. It can be a movie that I have never seen before, and it's halfway in. And I'm still going to get locked in and sit down. And oftentimes, especially if it turns out to be a really poor movie, like just as a little aside, during COVID, my daughter was living with us, and our daughter was living with us. And so we did flashbacks. So we did best of the 80s, to introduce her to all those great films from the 1980s. And we found out that some of those films were absolutely terrible. Ones we thought were kind of good back then. And I remember after every dog, that's a good application, every dog of a movie that we sat through, we were like, well, we're never going to get that 2 hours back again, you know? Have you ever done that before? Have you ever wasted money or time or thought on something that just wasn't worth it, right? That's at least a surface level of what Jesus is talking about. That's good advice. If we're talking about, material possessions, pearls, financial planners everywhere, if you ever go to one and wants their advice, what they're going to have you do just to save you some money is they're going to have you track every penny you spend for a month and see where it goes, see what needs to be cleaned up so you can get a budget, stay on the budget so that you get back to financial health. That's almost standard. It's a painful bummer. You know why? Because you find out how much you're actually spending at Starbucks and on wine clubs and whatever else you might be indulging yourself in, or how many subscriptions you have floating that you never actually pay attention to. Good advice. I don't know if it's Jesus worthy to have such a basic thing, but it's there. But I think there's more. And I think the key to understanding this on a much more powerful level, at least for me this week, has to do with that word holy. Holy. It's a very interesting word. This holy thing, first is attributed to God, and we see this in the Older Testament, and they were very serious about maintaining and honoring the holiness of God. They revered God as holy, and what holy meant was blameless and near perfect and pure. And so there was this idea that, if you or me, not so pure and not so blameless and not so perfect, if we would find ourselves in the presence of God, we'd get holied or something and we'd die. There was this passage in what we call the book of Isaiah, where it's the actual calling of the prophet Isaiah, and he has this vision. It's all in his head, but it's this powerful vision where he is in the throne room of God, and the train of God's robe is filling the entire temple. There are angels floating around, and all the smells and bells are happening, and he realizes that he's in the presence of God, and what comes out of his mouth? Woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips. He knows he shouldn't be there, and he's thinking he's a goner. He's terrified. And what does God do? Sends an angel and purifies his lips so he can feel like he can have a conversation in that space with God. That's how they thought about the holiness of God in that time. When they built their temple, they had rooms that only very, very holy, qualified people could go into, not just everyday people like us. And if you dared to go in, they were worried that you might die. And the birth narrative of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, you have the story first of the conception and the birth of John the Baptist, Jesus' distant cousin. And the way that came about, the way they heard about it, you have this wonderful old couple, Elizabeth and Zachariah. They're deeply revered for their holiness and faithfulness. It's his turn to go offer prayers for people. They're childless, they're old, and they don't think they're ever going to have a kid. And Zachariah is in this holy place offering prayers to God, and he hears from God. Now you need to know that according to commentators, people who would go into that special place to pray, they would tie a rope to their ankle, because what if they didn't go through the right purification rituals and so forth, and they were in the holy presence of God, and the holiness killed them? They tied the rope to their ankle so that the prayer giver could be dragged out. And so imagine that for him. That's the level of wonder and awe that they ascribe to God. And there's a beauty to that, isn't there? I mean, when we think about that, we're in church world circles, we're considered a low liturgy church. In other words, we're very, very casual, on purpose. Come as you are, bring your donuts, bring your coffee to the tables, not pews, and let's feel like a community and have conversation. We're about as informal as I can imagine it, right? There are other churches that are built different and do it different, and no shade here, because in some respects, they offer something that is a little bit more difficult for us to do. The architecture of some cathedrals here, even here in Napa, as soon as you walk in, you're just sort of in a state of awe at the beauty of the space. It's really remarkable. The liturgy, everything is meant to recognize the holiness and the magnitude of God and the smallness of us. And there's a place for that. I grew up in churches that we all wore our Sunday best. When I came to this church 26 years ago, it was a Sunday best church. Everybody dressed up. I dressed up in a suit pretty much every week for the first, year or so, until I started to shift that around and make people angry, and well, here we are. So, but there's a part to that, and in the best frame, what I've heard people say about dressing up for church is, well, I'm going to reflect what is on the inside, what I know is true on my inside, on the outside. So it's like I know that I'm holy, so to speak, on the inside, so I'm going to look my best on the outside, or I'm going to look my best for God and in God's worship center or whatever, because that seems like the right thing to do. There's a great place for that, and I respect that. However, in that same tradition that I did grow up in, that was very formal, both in its worship service and its dress code, I also found that it was easy for people to hide behind that covering. Easy for people to come in on a Sunday and leave, and nobody would know that they were dying inside because everything in their clothing said, I've got it together. In fact, I would go even further to say that sometimes the clothes that we wear impact how we behave and how we speak and how we present ourselves. At least that's true with me. I know that I have to literally check myself now whenever I wear a suit, because I know I'm wearing a suit. This is the whole school uniform argument, right? You put kids in school uniform, they're going to behave differently. This got its problems, of course, but so when we come together just wearing whatever we are, whoever we are, there's a beauty in that. But we lose a little bit of this holiness. Well, not only did God want to be revered and appreciated, but he also spoke into the people of God themselves and said, well, you're my people. You're holy, you matter, you have value. This goes right back to the Jewish creation poem in Genesis chapter 1, where at every turn God is saying, everything's good, everything's good, everything's good. But when he got to humanity, what was his thing? Male and female, God created them and said, you're very good. And somehow we've lost that over time. In the New Testament, in Jesus' time, his followers had something to say about this. And this shows up in 1 Peter 2:9, which was a letter to the churches, Jewish Christian churches. So they still consider themselves Jewish, but it has to do with holiness. And just as a little context here for you to understand, the people that are being addressed here, they understand themselves to still be Jewish, but they're following the teachings of Jesus, which is making them very unpopular with most of the Jewish people. And they're starting to feel ostracized. Some of them are being beaten because they're saying that they believe in the teaching of Jesus, and that's looked at as a cult. So imagine what this verse is going to say to people who feel terribly wounded and devalued. This authority is saying to them, you are a chosen people. You are royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession. As a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. You matter. You who are getting kicked in the teeth, you matter. You who are being told terrible things about who you are, you matter. Eugene Peterson in the Message translation, he says it this way: you're the ones chosen by God, chosen for the high calling of priestly work, chosen to be a holy people, God's instruments to do his work and speak out for him, to tell others of the night and day difference he made for you from nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. They're like talking identity here. What is our core identity? And what I want to say to you is that I think what God wants to say to you today is, you're holy. You may not feel like it, but you're holy. You're special. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. You're very good. My grandpa, Peter Smith, I'm named after him. He was also a pastor back in his day. And I only got to see him, in retirement years doing his thing. But he would address congregation or his Sunday school class that he would teach, and he would always call the congregation he was speaking to beloved. Beloved, I'm happy to be here today. It's kind of an old-fashioned word, but I kind of love it. It just has this quaint dignity to it. And it reminds everybody who hears the address that they are beloved. Beloved. So just endure me here for a moment. I want you to say with me so that you're saying this out loud. I want you to say out loud, I am beloved. Say it again, I am beloved. Take a breath. Now I want you to look around the room just a little bit. Don't hurt yourself or anything. Now I want you to say, we are beloved. Say it again. We are beloved. Now we know here at CrossWalk that these words do not particularly confer exclusionary power. In other words, we're not the only people who are chosen by God. We're not the only beloved, but we recognize that actually at God's core, everybody, everywhere, and all things are beloved. And so let's say together, all are beloved. All are beloved. Beloved, let's talk about what it looks like to be holy. I'm wondering, what does it look like to be holy? And in terms of what Jesus said about casting pearls, what holiness pearls do we actually cast? What does it look like to be a holy person casting pearls? And for most of us in this, what if we call CrossWalk home, we have this little motto that's part of our vernacular here. And you will see it if you still pay attention on your way out the parking lot. My guess is that you're so familiar with our campus that you just buzz on past it and forget what it says as you go. But do some of you know the 3 words you see as you leave the campus? Go be Jesus, right. So what did it look like to go be Jesus? This should all be very review for you. Go be Jesus means that we're going to stretch our minds because Jesus was a lifelong learner. That was a go be Jesus move. Jesus knelt in service to anybody and everybody to meet their needs with what he had. He stood with people for grace and justice when they needed his voice or his stature or his authority, whatever. He broke away and spent time communing with God. So we try to do that ourselves. And he connected with other people in community. This is what it looks like to lead a Jesus-y life. Jesus was, in my opinion, perhaps the most realized spiritual person we've ever seen, who understood his belovedness more than anybody we've ever known. And as he understood what that was like for him, this stuff came out naturally. It's because he knew he was beloved, he was just so curious to learn and understand more, even if it meant challenging held doctrine. He was so filled with love, he couldn't help, because he knew he was beloved, he couldn't help but kneel in service to somebody else. Because he knew he was beloved and everybody else was, he couldn't stand it, so he had to take a stand whenever he saw somebody getting beat up because of who they were. And he did that again and again. Because he knew he was beloved, he kept wanting to connect with the source of that love, which is God. So he'd break away. And because he was so beloved and knew that everybody else was, he knew he couldn't do it alone, wouldn't do it alone, because he had a beloved family all around him. It's a beautiful thing. If we want to learn what it looks like to be a holy person, a person of great faith, a whole, balanced, well-being type person, we look at Jesus, and these are 5 moves that we can count on. But I was introduced to a book by our own Angie Barker Jackson. I'm claiming Angie Barker Jackson as our own now here at CrossWalk, who's a great scholar and preacher. She introduced me to this book called Holy Currencies by Eric Law, and she and I are going to be tag teaming speaking in February. So you can look forward to that mid-February until Easter on this book called Holy Currencies. And he talks about these things as holy currencies, that our wellness is a currency that we work with. Our relationships, how do we seed the relationships in our lives? Truth, that kind of sounds a lot like the justicey one, but how are we standing for truth and how are we casting our pearls for such truth? Leadership, you may not feel like a leader, but you are in something. So how are you leveraging your leadership for the good, for what Shalom is wanting to do in the world? Your time, of course, we all know we can waste time and we can also invest time in something good. And then naturally, there's actual physical pearls, money, things of value. What are we doing with those? And that's the one I want to land on. You know I don't talk much about money, but as we head into Thanksgiving and this coming Saturday we have a feast, which is an opportunity for us to come together, be together as community. It's a free meal, so you're not paying for the meal, but we're asking that you would consider a gift at this time of Thanksgiving to help support the work that we have here, our capital campaign specifically. So I want to talk about this money issue and invite you into something. And I'm asking the question, where are you casting your pearls? And if you haven't done the CFP, 30-day check your spending thing, do it. Do it regularly. They make it easy now. Even your banking apps can show you where everything goes at a touch of a click on your phone. I mean, it's not hard to do, and it's very insightful and helps us be better stewards. Well, I want to make the case and ask you to support CrossWalk. I brought back our campaign banner here. CrossWalk, a shelter in life's storms is what we called the campaign, but this is bigger than a campaign. This is who we are. And I just want to remind you of who we are and why it is such a joy and such a privilege to be here and to support this. I want to just remind you, and I know this is true for probably most of you sitting here, that we're an oasis for people reconstructing their faith. I love that word oasis for this one, because when people start to lose their faith and realize that it's just not working the way that it once did, it becomes a very dry and arid place, like a desert. And you're like, I'm not even sure if there's any there to find. And when you find space where you can think about things differently, grow differently, wonder differently, say things out loud that you couldn't say other places, ask questions and all this, it's like food for your soul. It's like a drink of water. It's an oasis. And so that's CrossWalk. Just last week, I talked to a new visitor and just asking the person, well, how'd you find CrossWalk? And they were telling me they came from a more conservative tradition, and I've heard that a lot before. And before this person came for their first time, guess what this person did? Any guesses? Scoured our website, listened to several services because they wanted to make sure that they were not going to waste their time. And they found out that this might be an oasis, a place to think things through. Again, I think it is. I think it is because we are constantly curious. I'm still trying to figure it out. And what are we going to learn next year as we go through things? The reason I do books and teachings and stuff is because it gives us this voice to play with and stretch us all along the way. How am I going to get stretched? I can't wait. Let's see what happens in 2026. So we're an oasis, but we're also a sanctuary for immigrants seeking documentation. You're sitting around tables where people several times throughout the last 12 months have sat to get help from lawyers and other professional aides to work through their immigration status and become U.S. citizens. Isn't that remarkable? I love that. In-house, we don't have that capacity to help people to that kind of a degree, but isn't it awesome that CrossWalk is that kind of a place where we partner with multiple organizations offering our space and our hospitality so that great things like that can happen. I love that about this place. When you support CrossWalk, you're supporting that, which is beautiful and wonderful. When you support CrossWalk, you're supporting a refuge for people evacuated by Mother Nature. That's been a pride point around here for many, many decades. We're the first to open, last to close evacuation shelter for Napa County anytime Mother Nature calls. And we've beefed up our capacity with that so that you'll hear more about this in a minute, but where those evacuees go now is beautiful, it's safe, it's appropriate for access and functional need neighbors who are coming into our space. And now we have a brand new kitchen to provide meals over there legally and safely. I mean, it's wonderful. And that's for the community at large when we are called to service. But we're also a haven for people who are mistreated based on their identity. Now, this is all kinds of things, but the one that we highlighted especially last spring was the LGBTQ community. Because the LGBTQ community faces unbelievable blowback, especially since the return of the current administration. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. We know that. Here's a bummer. Most churches that are in the Christian persuasion haven't quite caught on to that yet. They're getting tripped up on their own doctrine or whatever. And isn't it tragic that the Church of Jesus Christ, capital C, is more known as anti a segment of humanity rather than hospitable, rather than haven. It's tragic. It's tragic. But not at CrossWalk, because we've made the moves. We've done the hard work. We've paid the price and have the scar tissue to prove it. And here we are as a place that flies the flag proudly with welcoming and affirming. And that is not a small thing. So way to go, CrossWalk. You're doing good. Yeah. And I mentioned this in the first service. This is sort of an interesting tension, but on the one hand, yeah, we're super, super proud of the stances that we've made on the basis of shalom and love. And yet I think one of the cool factors here, I was at a conference last spring with a bunch of other churches, most of which had not made this move and weren't real happy that we did. and their way of thinking, their line to me was, speaking of from their experiences, anytime a church becomes an LGBTQ welcoming and affirming church, that's the only identifier that they are. That's all they ever talk about. And while we do talk about that openly, obviously, I love the fact that we have plenty of LGBTQ members here, but that's not the first identifier. They're just who they are, because this is now family. It's just who you are. And I love that. It doesn't take anything away from the justice issue. I'm just saying it's wonderful that we have lived into it this much, that it's just who we are. It's not the leading issue, which is beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. And we're also a safe space for people seeking healing and recovery. This is just so remarkable. And you've heard this before, but just remember, 1,000 people a week. 1,000 people a week flow through that back hallway into those 3 rooms seeking recovery. 1,000 a week are finding hope and help and healing because we support it. And we said yes. Dar just shared in the early service today that she got a call this week for yet another. We already support 42 different groups of recovery, happening here throughout the week. And another one called and said, hey, we would like to do a Sunday morning 6:30 recovery. Could we do one of those? And of course, our answer is yes. By the way, anytime you whine and complain about having to wake up for church at 10 o'clock, think about the people who are getting up to work on their recovery at 6:30. I mean, that's incredible. So I love that, and I love all the ways that we've seen that benefit people. It's incredible and lovely. And the final thing I wanted to just say about this, to remind you about this campaign, the thing that we're really celebrating, again, all these different ways we're shelter, is that we're a harbor for people seeking loving community. Every church says they're loving. I really believe we are. I believe that we're very truly kind, that there's no need for pretense here. And I love the fact that we are all over the place in terms of our family backgrounds, our economic ability, our stage in life, all that. Just a little funny thing, because I get this on occasion. I'm going to going to tell you a kind of a story. So, Shannon Pruch and her husband, CJ, up in the sound booth, they have these two beautiful kids, Michaela and Xander. So Xander, he's this incredible athlete, by the way. He'll be a professional ball player, I think, in due time. I was out in Kids Crossing, and I saw Xander, and he came up to me, and he said, "Hey, Pastor Pete, how come we don't have any old people in this church?" Now, why would Xander ask such a question? Why do we have any old people in this church? It's because the church that he knows is filled with his friends. You know, some weeks it's just a handful, some weeks it's over, a dozen, 15 kids his age in that part of the building. Now, the reason I tell you this, by the way, Xander never really came up and asked me that, so you don't have to ask him about that when you get home today. But the reason I say that is sometimes people say to me, "Well, we don't have too many young people in this church." Well, guess what? Yeah, we do. We're actually quite well balanced in terms of the size of our church. And that program is thriving. They're part of our family. They're where they want to be, and they're getting the kind of treatment and ministry and attention and care and service that is going to really do well for them. If we brought them in here just to showcase them to you and made them stay here with us, they'd be bored out of their minds and couldn't wait to get out of church, which some of you may want to do right now. You may want to go visit Kids Crossing and our middle school, 412 Lounge, who knows? But anyway, we live in a time where people, more than any other time in American history, people are leaving church. That's still the case. But you know what the feedback is on a lot of these people who've left the church, the faith community? They say, the one thing that we didn't know that we were going to miss so much was community. A community of good people who wanted to do good things in the world, who wanted to lean into beloved community, who wanted to lean into being beloved and being beloved for others. And that's one of the things we offer here. As you know, when you come in, and that's why the Thanksgiving meal we're going to have Saturday matters. It's because, you have your family that you have to do Thanksgiving dinner with, but we're the family you choose to do Thanksgiving dinner with. And sometimes there's a difference. So we hope you'll make it to that. Okay, so for the ask, I'm asking you again, where are you casting your pearls, your money? And I'm asking you to support CrossWalk. And I'm asking you to think about this because we are Oasis, we're Sanctuary, we're Refuge, we're Haven, we're Safe Space, we're Harbor. And I'm asking you to think along a few lines. I'm asking you to think about our general fund, our outreach missions, and our capital campaign. General funds keeps the lights on. That's our biggest ticket around here every year. It costs a lot to be a church in Northern California because of everything. Everything you pay for in Northern California, just as a normal human being, costs more than most places in the country. Why? Because everybody wants to live here and makes everything more expensive, right? So that's true of our church, and we need money for that on the regular. And also our outreach missions, that's like our food pantry and Project Hope. Food pantry feeds those people in the gaps who can't make it to the food bank because of transportation schedule or dietary needs, and we care for them. And when I say we, what I really mean is Carrie Nuccio and Linda Smetzer for very, very good work and many, many hours. And of course, let's remember this new initiative that's happened, which is facilitating, equipping people, their food pantries when they come off houselessness and they come into their new home. They don't have the money to buy all the stuff to fill their pantries so that they can cook stuff. So we get to do that. And so I don't know how many you've done, but now we've partnered with News, Napa Emergency Women's Services, so the people who are coming out of domestic violence, who are also, needing space and needing food, now they're equipped. What a wonderful gift, what an opportunity. Well, what we've told you is if everybody who calls CrossWalk home just gives $30 a month, it's not a lot. $30 a month, we'll be able to fund all the things that we do. And we have more than that. We're part of a tribe called Evergreen, a part of our denomination that's super cool, and we want to support them. We're a part of an organization called Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptist, AWAB, because there is such a thing, and why wouldn't we want to support that in the world, who works with all kinds of Baptist denominations everywhere, and other things. So we want to support that. And the final thing I want to encourage you to consider CrossWalk for is our capital campaign. Now we're through with, we have raised the amount that we needed for phase 1 of the campaign. And the first thing we did, as promised, was we took care of our awful flat roofs, and they should be good for decades. which is great, and added our value, which is great, and that's already paying off with the storms that we've already had. But one of the other things that we promised we were going to do was start to address some issues here. Now let's just turn our gaze heavenward and look at this beautiful ceiling. It's not so beautiful, and it needs help. And so in January, actually the last week of December and the first week or so of January, this ceiling is going to be transformed in multiple ways. One, it's going to be beautiful, which is great, but it's also going to help our sound in here, so our acoustics are going to be better, and it's going to increase our R factor in here, so it'll be more energy efficient. And that's because of your generosity. It's not cheap to do what we're about to do, but again, that is going to last for decades to come and serve this place well. And we have other things in mind for this space to make it an even greater space than it is for many, many years to come. That's what the capital campaign is doing, but the next leg is going to be a whopper because we got to deal with our parking lot. If anybody has $400,000 or so in their checking account and wants to cut the check right now, that'll just about cover it. It's a lot. And we are reaching out to some other partners to help, but it's going to require us too to dig deep, believing in what this place is all about. So my actual ask to get very specific with you are these things. I'm asking you to think about beginning, if you haven't supported CrossWalk in any way, shape, or form, and especially if you call CrossWalk home and you know that. If you're a newbie, I get it. Why would you? You don't know who we are yet. But if you call this place home, I'm encouraging you to begin, if you haven't already, supporting us. It doesn't have to be a lot, whatever you can. I also want to say this. One of the things I love is that we come from different walks of life and different capacities in terms of finance stuff. There's this parable, or this it's not a parable, it's a moment in Jesus' life and ministry where he got really mad. And he saw this widow give what was called a mite and put it in the coffer of the temple. And he was not happy about it. She's often honored, and in a way, yes, let's honor her for sacrificing her very last half cent to the church to the temple that was taking care of her. But I don't think Jesus was happy about it because that's ridiculous. So what I want to say to you, if you have more month than money, keep your money. You need bread. You need to keep the lights on. You need to have your medications, whatever. In fact, if you need food, if you need help, we could probably help to a degree with some of that. So if you're starting to feel, anxiety because I'm talking about money and you don't have any, I'm not talking to you. And be blessed, be graced. You are beloved. It's okay. But I know that there are others of us here who have different levels of capacity. Some of us great levels of capacity, and some of us haven't leveraged that at all. And I'm asking you to begin because we need it. Oh, I forgot to say this in the last service. You'll have to spread the word for me. I'll get to it. All right. Say, Pete, don't forget. Thank you. All right, I'll try not to forget because this is important for you to know because it's a part of our urgency that we'll get to. And if you are already supporting us, I love what Angie said last year, where she says on an annual basis she looks over what she contributes toward CrossWalk, and adds 10% for the next year. So I encourage you to do that because that is going to help us in ways that you can't possibly imagine. I also encourage you to automate all of it. Our Realm software helps you do that. You can do that on your bank side. Just send us a check if you want to do it that way. It helps you because you don't have to think about it. It's just done. I've been doing this ever since it was possible. I love it because I want to support this place. That's a no-brainer for me. But I also don't want to have to think about it. Almost all my bills now are automated, right? I mean, how many of you do automated bill stuff? Of course. Just one of you. Okay, well, anyway, you might want to look into that. It's pretty cool. And it helps CrossWalk too because then we know it's coming in. And so as you're generous with us, I hope that you'll consider the automated side. And the final thing I want to say before I don't forget about the other thing has to do with estate gifts. Some of you have put your estate together, you have a trust or whatever. I'm simply asking you to remember CrossWalk in that effort because it makes a huge difference. You can't take it with you. And if CrossWalk has been this valuable thing for so many years of your life, this could be one great way to extend that for a long time for a major, major piece of help. I want to talk about just a few of these that have happened over the years to celebrate the generosity that we've already seen. About 15 years ago, I think, somewhere around that neck of the woods, a person came to me and they were really passionate about children and youth ministry and wanted to use some estate funds that she'd received to pretty up our youth space, which is now called the 412 Lounge. At that time, it was arguably the ugliest room in the church. So of course, that's where we're going to send the youth. It was awful. Now it's beautiful. It's been beautiful for 15 years. When kids graduated out of the elementary stuff and walked down the hall into the 412 Lounge, their immediate thought was, wow, I feel like I'm walking into a lounge at a sports arena or something. This feels really cool. That's exactly what we want, a cool space for them to feel like they want to be in that environment. Well, that's because one person was generous with money they received from an estate so long ago. The sign that we have on our building that says CrossWalk lights up at night, that's in honor of Fred Tremulin, that Darlene generously provided from that time to honor Fred, who loved this church and was a key contributor here for so many years. So when you see that, you can thank Darlene and thank Fred, because it's because of that generosity that we have that. We have this beautiful kitchen over here in our administration wing. It was totally redone about 7 years ago, somewhere in that neck of the woods, because we found out it was one of the ugliest kitchens in America. Did you know that? It was terribly dated, was not effective, and because of one contributor who came into some money from an estate, all of the cabinetry, all of the appliances, all of the finish work was paid for. And because we have skilled people here, we had guys like Ben Newman and Ted Valencia who were here pulling wire through concrete so we could have 4 convection ovens so we could cook stuff, when we needed to. A lot of sweat, probably a little bit of blood went into that. And then Jim Delasanta, this fool said, well, I will install the cabinets for you. He had no idea what he was getting into because every one of them had to be put together first. But Jim himself, and with some help, put all those cabinets in. And then because we wanted not just that space to look great, but we wanted our recovery rooms to look great during COVID, Lauren Haas, he handcrafted the cabinetry in all the recovery rooms so they would match up and be beautiful and functional. That all started because one person wanted to be generous with gifts that they got from an estate. I'm asking you, if you've received such a thing, perhaps this is your time to do that. Our gym locker rooms, by the way, those got updated because somebody came to me. They knew how ugly they were, and they were like, we want to do something. I just came into some money from the passing of somebody I dearly loved, and that became the seed money to give us confidence to go forward with the project. Your generosity matters, and it can matter for a very, very long time. It's significant. For the capital campaign, we have received money from estates, and it has helped us put the flat roof and take care of that roof for decades to come. And I'm wondering if some of you will choose to be generous, will recognize that you are beloved, and that out of your belovedness, out of the generosity that we have received from God and God's love for us, that you might do the same and pay it forward. Because somebody, many years ago, I don't think anybody is still alive that remembers this campaign, because I know when everybody joined this church, and our oldest members, Wanda's right up there, but I don't think Wanda was here when these bricks were put in place, because that was in the late 50s. Yeah, that's right, because he remembers it. And so your husband was, and Larry's passed. That generation that put these walls up for us to come and do all that we do, they paid it forward. So you and I, and Michaela and Xander, and the babies that we have donning our presence today, could call this place home. How can we do the same? Might we do the same? All right, the thing that I forgot to tell the first service, which I'll make sure that I communicate it to them one way or another. Actually, it's in my blog, so you can read about that. About 5 years ago, we had an angel that helped this church through COVID. COVID was a terrifying time for churches. We had to figure out quick how we were going to keep the community together, stay at church, stay funded, and there were so many questions. And there was a person that periodically, we didn't even know who it was, but all of a sudden, massive checks would show up. Massive donations, $20,000, $25,000. And we were like, don't know who this person is, but thank God they exist, right? I mean, just we were blown away by this person's generosity. By the way, the reason this person was so generous with us was because we're a shelter. And primarily for this person, because we were a shelter for people trying to recover from the stuff that was sticking them in life. And she knew that we did so much for the community. This was a way that she could give back. And she's been so generous. And a couple years after COVID went away, well, it's not away, is it? But anyway, she came to my office and said, hey, I want to find out, what projects do you have going on at the church that I can help with? And so I went through some things that I thought she might love, like the parking lot. Who doesn't want to support a parking lot, right? Well, that wasn't very interesting to her, so I understand that. Okay. Well, hey, flat roof, anybody? Flat roof? Those are pretty exciting. That didn't sound too great. Well, how about recovery stuff? Maybe there's some week. No, okay. Well, we're trying to revamp our children's ministry here, and we could use help because what generally happens is we get to a place where we can afford to staff it, which we really need to be able to keep it at a high quality level, which we do now. But then times will get tight and we have to make cuts, and oftentimes it's our part-time employees, which are our children's ministry, which immediately causes the program to get stuttered again. That's been our story. So when this person heard that was it, she lit up. She was like, oh, I would love to invest in these families. And so this wonderful donor, incredibly generous, who just barely, I think she donned our services maybe 4 times that I know of. I promised a gift, $50,000 a year for 10 years. And the vision was that by the time that 10 years was up, we would be in a sustainable place where we wouldn't need it anymore. That was the vision, and we're in year 3 of it, I think, right now. But she moved away, and she wants to invest in local things where she is now. And so she let us know that that's coming to an end. And she'll give us half of that next year, which is great. And so it's deeply disappointing because we had our plan, but I also at the same time, again, want to say thank you to that donor who doesn't want lots of fanfare, because we never would have taken the leap of faith that we did to get Kids Crossing where it is, or the 412 Lounge, without that kind of support. And it has been deeply, deeply valuable, and I am deeply, deeply grateful. And I understand these are her resources to do what she pleases with, but that creates an interesting challenge for us. It means $25,000 for next year, for 2026. Well, actually the way we do it, we'll have it through 2026, what we're used to. But then when we get to that next year, we got to figure out how are we going to cover that $50,000. Well, I'll tell you how we do that. We do that when folks who love this place, who haven't yet started to contribute, decide to get in on the game and be generous at whatever level is possible. And it happens when those of us who support already take a look at it and say, I can do another 10%. Because a 10% increase on what you might be doing already might not be that much. And maybe we can up it even more. I want to say finally, that anything I'm asking you to do, because it is kind of weird, right? That the guy who is, one of the senior staff here, the senior pastor of the church, salaried pastor, all that, is the guy who's talking about this, right? I mean, that's a little awkward and weird, perhaps. You might be like, well, of course, you're begging for money up there, Pete. This matters to you. I want you to look at it different. I'm not just your pastor, I'm your partner. I'm one of you. From the first day Lynn and I came here, we began giving at a sacrificial level because that's what we were taught as kids growing up in a pastor's home, both of us. We were said, you make that commitment and you keep it top priority. so that even as other challenges come, you may have to adjust to some, but you make that cut first. You cut that check first, and we have. This year, I'll marry 2 kids. Those crazy kids. And yet, we will maintain our support because we love this place and because we're in it for the long haul. And I want it to be said of me as we can say of those who put these bricks in place. They were faithful, and we're here because of it. And I hope that Lynn and I's support is going to provide that for generations to come who I will never know, who they'll just remember me as a name in a history book of CrossWalk's history somewhere. And how wonderful will that be? That I got to be a part of something that was offering so many forms of shelter for so many people for so long. I hope you'll join me in generosity to see this place shine. That's okay. All right. Yeah, let's do it. Would you join me in prayer? So here we are, God, beloved. Beloved. That the good news of Jesus was to tell everybody everywhere, no matter what they'd heard before, no matter what they told themselves. We're beloved. Not that we would be arrogant with it and hold it over others that we think are less beloved, but that we would build a life on an identity of being deeply and profoundly loved because we are, just as we are. And out of that belovedness, we would quite naturally love. So today, God, we're talking about how we cast our pearls, how we share our love, how we choose to be generous with that which we have. May your Spirit work with us, remind us of how loved we are, not guilt and shame us into anything, but invite us into something extraordinary and beautiful and wonderful that is so much bigger than ourselves, where you are working even with people who can't stand the name of God or church or Jesus. They're finding help and hope because somebody decided to step up and make it happen and fund it. God, may it be said of us that out of our deep love that we have for you who loved us first, that we just couldn't help but be generous. May it be so. I ask this in the name of Jesus, who we follow. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. Hope you had a good experience. We'll see you next week. Or see you Saturday for Feast.